Hi everybody, Tracy Brown. If anyone is listening, I know it takes a few minutes for people to get on, but if anyone is listening to or watching this right now, can you give me a thumbs up or a message saying that you can hear this properly? This is the third time I've tried to record this video today, and the first time got cut off for my little one hopping the scene. And the second time was everybody said that there was this loud beeping sound. Awesome. So you can hear me fine. Is that correct? Give me a smiley face or something that you can hear me just fine. There's no like shrieking, shrill, beeping sound. Or a message like, yep, I can hear you just fine, just to make sure. Oh, perfect. Thank you so much for letting me know. I can get started. So this is my third time. Maybe the third time's a charm. Maybe I was talking too fast in the second one and it wasn't clear. So I'll take that for what it is. All right. So the title of our talk is on here about how to get out of the cycle of going back to restricting once you started this process, whether it's intuitive eating or if you call it recovery for you, whatever you call it. Sorry about that, guys. Before I go into that topic, which this video will last as long as it needs to last because I'm going to go into some depth today. But before we get into it, it's Monday. It's Monday before Thanksgiving if you're listening to this live or in the next day or two. And I want to make sure everybody is starting to think about, if they don't already have it figured out, their plan for the holidays, meaning Thanksgiving here in America is Thursday, and it's a food-centric holiday, so it's really important to know, to have an idea of how you want it to go. And so for those of you further along on the journey, it just may be that you're going to show up and make sure that you don't undereat, compensate in any kind of way, and just have the meal and eat what you really, really want, and you have good self-care in place. If you don't have any of that in place and you're pretty new, like a year or less, or so into this process, then, or maybe a year and a half, whatever, it's really important that you start thinking, if you haven't already done it today, start now, of thinking about when that main meal will be. Have an idea of the kind of foods that you really want to be eating, and have a plan for doing that with as least guilt as possible. Now, I'm not saying that when I say, and don't be guilty, or don't feel guilty, it's not going to help us to be told like how we should feel, but it's more about diminishing that autopilot response, like I eat more food or I eat richer food and I automatically feel guilty, versus I'm planning on having pie. And how I'm doing that is, eating the meal, including the dessert, not to over fullness, or to planning that in, if you're doing a meal plan, into your meal plan. So it's not a surprise. You feel fine about it. You want to make it as close to normal as we can get. So normal looks different depending on the year that you're in this process. Okay, so that's part one. So having a cutting back compensatory way to handle the food that day is super important. So you might want to plan it out. If you need help with those things, I have a guide on my website, Help for the Holidays, and really I have a whole almost hour audio talking about how to walk yourself through that, like the whole process. So, and I did that on a video actually back in October as well, if you need help. So those are both available. The part two of it is making sure you have a plan for self-care. And so I was working with a client this morning. So this is going to be a double video, I guess, about that. Real quickly, what we worked on today was expecting people to actually, and she knows her audience, her people, of she's going to be with at Thanksgiving. She knows what's going to happen. These people are not different than they were last year before she started this journey. And so they're probably going to say negative food, body-centric things. And so she has her list of things that she's going to do to give herself time outs, give herself ways to be grounded, give herself ways of just being compassionate with, like, yeah, that's going to happen. That doesn't mean that I need to do anything different about my journey, my process, and appreciate what is good about what's going on around being family, if there is that to be found, which I'm sure there is, and leave the rest. So if you need to be doing lots of, I call them bathroom vacations, that's totally fine. If you need to be outside more, that's totally fine. Even if it's cold, find ways to get actually energetic breaks from people as well. So that's just 2 short little things you can do for the holidays. I didn't want to get too in-depth with that because I've done that already on a different video. So this video is about when we turn back towards food restriction, when we have either begun the intuitive eating process or maybe we're well into it and we find ourselves back there for some reason. The inspiration for this topic in this video came from just a really lovely message in my inbox yesterday around, can you talk about, I just started this process and I'll get a week or two, basically the gist of the question was, I just started this process it's been a month or 2 ago, and I'll go a week or 2 and do intuitive eating and eat more from hunger and fullness, and it'll just basically freak me out because I'm not controlling my food. And this person specifically had talked about how had been on certain kind of programming for a while, and that had caused some disordered eating around like eating right or eating healthfully, as well as fear of weight gain, where previously that hadn't been as intense. Here we go. I have a cute little distraction. 1 second. On the phone. Okay, we'll just leave it there. I'll put it away. And that's the way live video goes. So, this is the 3rd time doing this video, so I'm not going to do it again. Anyway, and so the discussion for if I were to work with this person, so I'm going to act as if I am on this video. And so she talked about how the fear of weight gain, the fear of eating unhealthfully is so strong that her efforts to eat intuitively will last a week or 2, and then she's back to kind of slowly cutting back, and sometimes that becomes a pattern and she'll catch it and go back. And so what I want to say, there's a level of I don't know anybody that just full force did intuitive eating and never looked back. I know I certainly didn't. And so we want to have a lot of compassion for dieting as a container that we push down and contain so much of feelings and experiences. I've talked about this a lot, that we have a hard time with. And sometimes it might not be things that you think are that big a deal. I have a lot of people come to me this is an example. My childhood really wasn't that bad in terms my mom dieted all the time, and I was around that kind of stuff, but I wasn't really disordered. I just thought that weighing less was better. I went on, you name the diet, Weight Watchers, Jenny Craig, some other kind of thing, and I lost some weight, and I felt like I wasn't really having to diet that much to just maintain my weight lower. And then something happens where people, either their weight will go back up and they didn't think it was that big a deal that they cared that much, or they go on to something a little bit more intense, or something else intense also happens in life, and it further strengthens that already, there was food and body preoccupation before, but it was so low level normal in their experience, it didn't feel like it was causing them that much harm. And then once the ante gets upped in something happening in life, and diet mentality gets entrenched even deeper around worth and strength and pride and all that kind of stuff, that's when we see, when you start to let that go, that intensity gets real big. And so what we're talking about this week is once you start to take the lid off the programming around dieting, a lot of emotions are going to come up, and every single time you aren't eating per program, a person might feel oh my gosh, I'm eating more normally and I'm sure that I'm gaining a lot of weight. That may or may not be and most of the time it's not what's actually happening. They can feel that way. So again, I say, one, you honor that it feels that way, but also leave room in your mind and your experience that it may not be actually happening. So I also need you to start decoding that. And I've talked a lot about decoding in other videos as well. So I'm not going to do a ton of that here. But this person asked very specifically, she's I don't see a lot of, videos or articles written about what is it that you do when you're just basically afraid of weight gain through intuitive eating. And that was the gist of what does she do when she wants to restrict again because of that fear. And I would say, okay, I will just walk you guys through a couple things that I do in session with clients to start to challenge those fears. Because the bottom line is, again, we're programmed to think that weight gain is a bad thing, that emotional eating is a bad thing, that weighing more is the worst thing that could ever happen, and otherwise, why would people be afraid? It's just, I was talking to a client today, and we were actually doing our session outside, which was so nice, and in my line of vision, there were 5 different kinds of trees right in front of me, and I said, there are 5 different kinds of trees. What makes us believe inherently that that tree is any better than this other tree? And of course, the answer is there's nothing. They're just different forms of trees. The same thing with humans. Like, we all like, oh, that sounds really nice, and it sounds really, I think in our hearts we know it's true, but we have so much programming around worth with body size that it's hard to let go of trying to be small. So again, if that person was sitting with me right now, what I probably, based on her questions, would start to talk about is, okay, so what, if you were to get, I want people to get really clear about their beliefs about what thinness means and what fatness means. And so I would have this person, don't filter, don't try to speak from the mind of somebody who's been intuitive eating for a couple of weeks or a year, or knows anything about health at every size, or body liberation and positivity. I would say, okay, just what is stereotypically taught through our normal, quote-unquote, culture. When you think of the word thin, what do you think of? And list all the characteristics. And so if anybody wants to participate right now, I'm happy to let you guys join in on this exercise. And I'm going to list 1 or 2. So a person typically might tell me thinness equals success. And thinness equals being accepted. Let's just say those 2. And you could make a list of 10, and I usually make people do as many as they can. And so the other piece of the side of the sheet would have fatness equals what? And a person might say unhealthy and might say unattractive. And they might feel guilty for thinking those 2 things, or they might put lazy, and they might feel guilty for saying those things because I think inherently, everybody that I've ever met in this process, they're good people. We're good people. We don't want to be prejudging and biased and all that kind of stuff, but that's what's in us. So we have to basically unlearn that, and we definitely make peace with ourselves within that, and also do better in our lives without judging each other. So anyway, I would have my person who emailed me answer those questions for me. And just to kind of keep that in mind and see where some of that around that fear is coming from, and get really, really personal around, for example, the word if fatness, if they gain weight, they would think that people would think they were lazy because they think that people would think that's lazy. And so I would have a person say, hey, look, the fact that you're actually taking your time on a weekend to email me a question, to me feels like the least far away from lazy, because that takes some effort and some proactiveness to do that. So if you were inherently lazy, you wouldn't have done that. And so I want to help people disrupt those stereotypes as much as possible. So that's one way I would help people move away from this idea, these really deep underlying core things around what they think thinness or fatness means. Because if we weren't so pedestalizing thinness and so denigrating fatness, and a person could be looked at as the totality of who they are, we wouldn't have all these stereotypes. And so another exercise, so I'm giving you guys hopefully a lot of value today around some things to do when you feel like that you need to restrict after you haven't been, if you start intuitive eating. I do want to do a little side note that I know that once we start working deeper into these topics, and once you've healed a lot of your cultural conditioning, and for lack of a better word, you're pretty bought into the idea that there's no one better body type to have, that you don't think that fatness is a bad thing to be or to have anymore. You could see body and weight prejudice from a mile away, and you're just not part of that anymore. Then what you'll find is if you still feel uncomfortable with your body, there's going to be some other core, deeper stuff that's also happening too. And that's why, struggles with eating are so tricky and take time, because it's you're working on the function of controlling your food and weight or not controlling, but even just your relationship with food and weight. You're working on that on so many different levels. So you've got like the systemic level, and you've also got the very personal and the levels of where it just felt safe or not to get your needs met or to express your needs. And so you're working at really younger and deep levels, usually underneath some of the systemic, like cultural stuff. So that's why things are so layered. And I do understand that, like, once you get past some of that, for some people, there's enough safety in their systems to be like, I've got it, I'm good. Like, I've made peace, I move on. And those are my clients that, aren't with me a long, long time. They might work with me 6 months or 2 years. But I also have clients that work with me longer. And that's not because they're necessarily doing things wrong or whatever their process or whatever's going on, but there's more layers to their story. And so we only go as fast as the slowest parts can go. And so what I want to say to those of you listening who feel like, I've been doing this a long time and I still struggle, it's I would say, if you need more support to get this process a little bit more efficient and to see your kind of some of the places in the corners or the crevices that maybe don't have a lot of light shine on them, then that may be the only thing you need, and a little bit of time with somebody might be helpful. But for some of us, we just need to go at the pace we need to go to not overwhelm ourselves, because sometimes letting go of dieting completely would feel like we've got nothing left and there's no bedrock to any kind of safety. And so it takes a little longer and a little slower, and that's not that you're doing it wrong. So I just want people to hear that as well. Super important to acknowledge that, like, we all come at this with different layers and levels of experiences and trauma and things like that. And then, sorry, it's a little ladybug almost landed on my head. But it's fun to be in the present moment with these things. Number 2, exercise number 2, if you're fearful about, and this client, or this not client, but this person who wrote me this email, there's also the sense in that it's like there were some fears about eating certain kind of foods. So I want people to know that I know that in the intuitive eating book, things aren't super specific, because you can't go through every possible experiment like I'm doing with you right now, or every intervention you could ever do, because the book would be never ending. Learning about intuitive eating and being embodied is such an experiential process that, like, what works for one person, I have things with some clients that I will never do with certain clients, and vice versa. Or there's a few things that I do with almost everybody, and there are some things it's like some people they don't need, or it would be too much, or it's just not necessary, or whatever. So we don't need to know to know every little detail about every little thing that you could possibly do. It'd be too much. It'd be information overload. It'd be fire hosing you if there was a book written. So that's why, the nuances through these videos, and the people who, like me, or the people who blog and write stuff, like, we want to let you know, like, these little steps. So anyway, I could tell from this person that she was probably feeling a little bit overwhelmed with the idea of eating not only just more food, but the kinds of foods. So there's all kinds of ways to get to testing the waters a bit with intuitive eating without overwhelming yourself. So you don't have to fully go to, like, eating everything you want to eat, because that can feel so overwhelming that it is too much, and we boomerang back and forth, and it's really dramatic and exhausting. So for me, I didn't do it that way. I had to kind of ease in, and there were times I took bigger experiments. So, if you're really working towards, I need to be eating more food, just to have, like, and this goes for everybody, whether you consider yourself a binge eater, somebody who's just is mostly restricting. The thing is that no matter what your size is, if you're not eating enough food, you're going to cause some obsession. You're going to cause some just bodily fear of not getting your needs met. So it's really important to work towards consistency in eating enough to calm down your nervous system, basically teaching your body to trust you, as well as eating enough to where you can get accurate signals of hunger and fullness. People often try to do intuitive eating, but, like, honestly, not quite eat enough, and it turns into another, like, intuitive eating diet. You have to push yourself to, like, feel some fullness and wait for, like, the hunger signal to come back, and do this over and over and over again to kind of, like, learn about how your body works. And so If it feels too scared to just eat donuts when you haven't eaten a donut in 2 years, don't do that. But if it feels safer to, like, I'll eat 2 slices of toast with jam to get a little bit more full, that's fine. Whatever you need to do, whatever feels safe enough to, like, move forward in the steps that you can, that's totally fine. So I wanted to give that piece of information out too, is that some people try to go from really strict programming, like no carbs or no whatever, to like eating bunches of carbs and freaking themselves out. You don't have to do that. You can, and that'll habituate you faster, but you don't have to do that. And so I just want you all to know how you have permission. And you know, again, for some people, they just need to jump right in and do it. And some people need to be slower and more nuanced, but like keep the momentum going forward, then that's fine. And the third thing I would have people do is make a pro and con list. A pro and con list of, on top of your paper, a pro and con, and I have actually, it's been a while, but I know it's on my website, it's on a blog post I did about, you know, kind of like, yeah, basically the pros and cons of dieting. And there is a worksheet. I forgot about that till just now. Oh my goodness. If I can find that, I will link it below, but I have an actual worksheet to do this, of what kind of holds you back. And a lot of times not knowing what you're getting out of going back to restriction is super important, because if you don't know why and you keep going back and forth, you're just going to keep going back and forth. But if you have an idea of like what, and you can even have like desires to want to lose weight, that's enough to kind of keep you kind of stuck, even if you're not dieting. But it's really important to do like a pro and con of, let's say, pursuing thinness. So like on the con list of, on the pro list of pursuing thinness, a person might say, I feel like I have more control. And I want you to go deep with this. Like, what do you feel you have more control over? Because when I ask, if I don't ask that question, I'm not going to know. But every single time I ask that question from people, oh, there's a different, it's not just controlling the food. It's never just about controlling the food, ever. So if you think that's what it is, it's never about that. It seems like that on the surface. If we control our food, we can control our weight. We can get XYZ in our life. But what we're really trying to control is usually something within ourselves, some kind of emotion or experience, or we're trying to manipulate other people. And it's not meant to be in like this hurtful kind of way, but it's like we sometimes, manipulate people's emotions, which is if I do this, I will get my, let's say, parents to care about me. So you're trying to change somebody. And so if let's say I get thinner and they get worried about me, then I'll know they care. Because on like this adult relational level, we're not, that doesn't feel like it's happening, or it's not connected, or we're not communicating, or whatever. So it feels like this is a way you can try to like get that. Or if it's like, doesn't have to be that example, but that's just one that just popped into my head. Or if I continue to pursue weight loss, a pro of that would be I can be more attractive. I would say, okay, attractive to whom? And for what? Oh, well, to get people to like me. Okay. And so when we're trying to get people to like us through our bodies, have we thought about what it is that you're actually inviting? And so I really want people to get really deep into this, because when you start seeing that and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm not sticking with intuitive eating because I'm afraid that I can't get people to, that people won't actually like me unless I'm thin. And is that actually true? It doesn't negate anybody's pain. We've all had these painful experiences of being like criticized for our bodies, or bullied, or feel like we need to be perfect to get, adoration or encouragement or whatever. If you've been in a bigger body at any time in your life and you were criticized, controlled, bullied, weight bullied, put on a diet when you were 10, told by a doctor you better watch it because, you're growing, but don't grow too much. If any of those shamings have happened to you, of course you're going to want to try to lose weight to be out of a shamed category of people. Totally, I don't know, I don't think anybody would blame that. It's just that it's not the solution to get rid of the perpetuation of the shaming and of the bullying, and it's also not going to heal that wound. You being thinner won't heal that wound, but helping you get what you need now to help heal that old wound and to heal that trauma is what has to happen. Getting thinner is not going to fix it. It will always leave that hole. So we feel like if we've been emotional eating or binging or whatever it is, and I'll lose weight, so that won't happen to me again. That's totally understandable. And it's just a big paradigm shift that we're deciding to make to try to get our needs met and feel respect for ourselves in just a totally different kind of way. And so this is deep stuff, you guys. So I mean, like I said, this is stuff that I've written about or talked about a while ago, and I'm just kind of bringing it back in a hopefully a more depthful way. And these are things that I talk about in sessions. And so the con, of course, it's kind of easy to write out the cons of restricting. I mean, food obsession, lack of energy, lack of focus, being irritable, not fully present with people, going out to eat is like an ordeal in itself. On and on and on and on and on and on and on. So I want you to make these lists. And then when you go back and you're seeing, like, in that moment when you're trying to decide, do I eat another bite? Do I eat another slice of toast because I'm still kind of hungry? Or do I restrict because maybe that if I lose some weight, then I can, like, control blah, blah, blah. It's really important that you have these lists to look back on and say, okay, wait a minute. What is it that I'm trying to do with this restriction right now? What am I getting out of this that I think that restriction will help me? Because I know that it's hard to, like, anybody that's on this process are totally brave, because this is not easy work. It's actually effort and it's work. And most of us don't do it alone without some kind of, like, I mean, again, guidance, these books, these whatever, because this is deep stuff and we can't always see some of the nuances of the stuff and what keeps us kind of hooked in. Okay, so I'm hoping this video was helpful to you all. If you think it was, please share it. If you have questions, please tag me so I can be maybe specific to you. I will go back if I can and find that blog post that has a worksheet to some of this stuff. I wrote something similar to this about 3 years ago. Maybe 4. I think it was actually at least 3 to 4 minimum. I'll see if I can go find that for y'all. So I think that's it. I know we're a couple of days out from Thanksgiving. If you're still struggling with that, I have resources on my website. I got a couple articles out there in circulation right now, at least 2 or 3, that hopefully will be helpful to you to, like, have a good base, get grounded, have a plan. I think that's it. So thank you, everybody who was live listening and watching. I hope this was helpful. Anybody who listens to the recording, again, I welcome your comments. If you want to tag me for a question, please do so. And I do plan on I would love to do a video on Wednesday if y'all are interested. Let me know. Give me a thumbs up or give me, like, a comment. I'd like to just do a Q&A on Wednesday, sometime in the afternoon, probably early afternoon, around this time, maybe a little earlier. If anybody's interested, let me know. Or if you want something just topical for me to talk about, I will too. But I want to talk again before Thanksgiving. And I think that's it for now. Thank you all so much and this was my 3rd go round, so I'm so happy that we got this going and got this out there. So thank you so much for being patient, and I'll talk to you all soon. Thanks.